Well, hello everyone, and welcome to today's Move Daily Talks. You know that we're all about moving daily in our fitness, wellness, and nutrition. And I know a lot of you have heard me quote Ovid before when he says, dripping water on the stone hollows it out not through force, but through persistence. That really is such an amazing theme that conceptualizes everything that we do at Move Daily Fitness. Because what we want you to do is to be in it for the long haul. So drip, drip, drip. All of those micro processes add up over time to move the needle toward better health. And that's what we want for everyone here. Dr. Daniel Hochman is a board certified psychiatrist with a private practice in Austin, Texas. He's the creator of Self Recovery, which is an effective addiction recovery program that has helped people in over 40 countries. He and his program are also recognized as one of the leading alternatives to Alcoholics Anonymous. Self Recovery offers a science-based approach that addresses both substance and behavioral addictions. This includes alcohol, food, pornography, work, phone, yes, phone, and more. I love focusing on the wellness piece, and that's exactly what we're going to do in today's conversation. And a quick reminder before we jump into this conversation, can I ask a favor? I would love it if you subscribe to this podcast. You can do that anywhere you stream your podcast. Just tap the little plus sign. If you're over on YouTube, you can follow along by hitting that subscribe button over on my YouTube channel and then hitting the little bell, which notifies you when a new podcast comes out. All right, let's jump into this. So welcome to the podcast. One of the things that we think about regularly at Move Daily Fitness is how do we move forward in our fitness, wellness, and nutrition? And as I was saying in the intro before you joined, such a big component for me when it comes to coaching our women in forward growth, moving toward better health, is certainly the wellness component. And that's why I'm so excited to talk to you today, because I know that's what you're all about. I'd love to hear, what are you on a mission to do with your work?
Ooh, that's a good and big question. I think where I come from usually for people is I like to remove wasted efforts. Like it's a shame for me to watch people not just struggle. So like of course I want people to not struggle as people. Um, but sort of the more narrow bent on that is I just think people waste a lot of effort because they don't know quite what it means to work on themselves or what they would do. And so they're just trying really hard in vague ways. So that's a big thing I pay attention to that I enjoy doing.
Hmm. Okay, so what in your mind's eye does it mean to work on ourselves? How do people go about doing that?
It can be a lot of things for different people, of course, but the general strategy and the thing I'm referring to where people generally miss is they're just saying something too kind of vague about themselves. So like, well,
Mm.
I don't seem to try very hard, or I don't have motivation, I don't have discipline. And those are very vague ideas rather than breaking something down. So to me, to work on yourself means you're not wasting the effort on more generic sort of self-deprecating things. Instead, you're breaking it down into like exactly what's wrong with you. So for me, working on yourself is not just sort of half lies that like, oh no, I'm good, I'm
Yeah.
beautiful, I'm smart, I'm likable. Like we can't just make ourselves feel better. And I
Mm.
think a lot of people find themselves stuck doing that. And instead, as a psychiatrist, I actually invite people to look at what's wrong. That's what good work is, not just as treatment, but even if you're working on yourself on your own, it should include looking at what's wrong. But don't do it in just a shaming way. Do it in a very particular fashion.
I love that. But that is a lot of the messaging that we see, with in the self-help community is just positive thoughts, thinking positive, and just make these declarations and you'll move forward and you'll feel better. But I agree, there's just so much more in Pandora's box when we open it, isn't there?
There is, and the simplest way to understand why the positive stuff doesn't work on its own is if it did, we'd all feel fine, right?
Sure. Yeah.
We most of us have enough things to point to that are going okay or even well, that if that worked, it'd be too easy. Nobody would suffer because
Yeah.
even if you were screwing up on your own and didn't have much to point to, you could still practice other positivity through things like gratitude and appreciation and say, oh, well, at least I get to live like a king compared to 200 years ago, or at least I'm still alive even past 40, which nobody was before on average. So, if that was enough, we'd all feel amazing. And the fact that it isn't is proof enough. I mean, I could walk through the literature and a lot of the misguided ideas around like positive psychology. But we don't even need to because we all already have our own experience that tells us like it just doesn't really work in the end. Um, and in case people are confused, I mean, it's still nice to have good ideas about ourselves or the world, and those can feel good when they come. But part of the point is those things arrive and fill us on their own, and we have to be open enough and believe that that might be true in order to let that in to begin with. So we can't just skip all the steps in between
Mm.
and just command ourselves to feel positive.
Yeah. Are people surprised at how much work lays before them when they come into your office? Like, are they like, oh, I didn't realize we were going to go that deep.
Sometimes I
Mm.
do a good job of screening because I have my own solo practice, so I tend not to have surprises there. So I let people know, before they step foot in the door, we're going to go deep.
Mm.
Um, but I'd say it can be the opposite, where some people feel like they're going to have to keep rehashing childhood traumas, history of being molested, or
Mhm.
terrible relationships, traumatic childhoods. And yes, I mean, we visit those things, but it's not like we have to keep rehashing and rehashing and rehashing. Instead, what most people will benefit more from is looking more at how that's changed you, your philosophies, your beliefs, your values, what patterns you've developed out of that.
Mm.
And those things are less scary. They're still difficult to look at, and it can be sad to look at things that we've done that haven't been healthy, bad patterns. So that can still be difficult work, but it's not like we have to keep revisiting traumas over and over every time they come in. And in that way, people are sometimes much more excited and hopeful when they know
Mhm.
it's not necessarily difficult in that way.
Right, because they're coming into you with a problem that they have currently, right? So whatever has happened in the past is informing their behavior today. And so they're like, help me with this. I'm not good in this relationship. I'm not good with this addiction. I'm like over drinking, overeating, over exercising. Help me today. But obviously, you're looking back and saying, okay, I see how your past has informed your behaviors today, but we can focus on this part. Yeah. So a lot of your work is in addictions and in recovery. You have a program called Self Recovery, in fact, which is this science-based approach that addresses substance and behavioral addictions. So talk to us about how you started that part of your work.
It kind of came about naturally when I was getting referred a lot of cases on this topic. So I've seen patients throughout this whole time of my practice where I see depression, anxiety, PTSD, anything normal in the mental health space. But I started getting more and more referrals for addiction because of the way I approach it. So a lot of people treat it kind of superficially, more around accountability and kind of rules and willpower. And over time, people find that doesn't work. So as I developed a reputation here, I'd get more referrals, and I can't see everybody. And again, what bothered me was just the shame of like I I know I can help these people calling, but I don't have the time
Yeah.
to see each person. So I had to think for myself, like, what are the most important themes and tenets of like that everyone would need to learn in this space? And can I put those in a program that can take people there even without coming in to see me? So it took a couple of years to put together, and I contracted with someone around educational design and programming, and so made sure it was something that could work without that one-on-one time with me. And it has, it's worked marvelously. So yeah, it's born out of, to me, just a need. There aren't enough people that can guide people through this in a way that the depth that's required to
Mhm.
really change around it.
What sort of increase did you see around the pandemic era? I'm guessing that, so many of us were locked in our homes and alcohol and food became something that we did regularly to either take us away from boredom, to deal with some of our fear and panic or anxiety about the future, about our jobs. What was that like at that time for you?
Yeah, there's a lot more drinking, a lot more.
Yeah,
And I mean, the data backs that up wildly. And
really.
I think it highlights just how alcohol solves so many different things at the same time, and that's why it's so pervasive. Some people were turning to alcohol because they were stuck in the house with family or a bad relationship. So,
Mhm.
it served as some kind of numbing or escape from a bad relationship. For other people, it was more around the chaos. Other people, they were scared and there were the fears. Um, yeah, and also just not having enough space at home. And other people were bored, right? And not having like the social interaction. And so, out of boredom, drinking. So there were a lot of pathways to drinking more. And I think it highlighted all of that. And there wasn't necessarily a whole lot to keep it in check. There was less driving and there were less
Sure.
accountabilities in place socially, if you weren't getting out much. And so, it was one of the few fun things people could do as well. So
Mhm.
it was a really bad recipe.
No kidding. I wish it wasn't fun, like I wish it didn't taste good and that it wasn't so fun initially because the side effects are just can be so detrimental to so many parts of our lives, our brain, our health, our well-being, our interactions, our like everything. It's quite the substance, but so many people, as you said, use it to numb feelings and emotions. And I want to talk about that today because I love this part of your work, that we have these feelings that rise up. Sometimes they're super uncomfortable, we don't want to feel them. Even boredom can be so uncomfortable for some of us that we don't want to feel it, and an easy way past that is to numb with alcohol or whatever substance of choice people have. You said that almost no one develops an addiction without experiencing chronic emotional pain. The more pain we experience, the more our bodies seek pleasure or numbness. And then you alluded to something called the current of addiction. I'd love for you to explain that to the audience. Yeah, go ahead and talk to us about that.
Maybe just real quick first, because yes, that is the way I model addiction. There are people who, let's just say, drink, a lot here and there, and they may not have a true addiction, and they may not have this underlying, chronic emotional pain.
True.
Um,
Yeah.
so what I'm referring to when I talk about this are people with a more ongoing struggle. Um, some people do just use it recreationally, and that can be that. But for people that struggle in an ongoing way, yeah, there's always this underlying intolerance for emotional pain.
Mm.
So the current that I call is really integrating a lot of our most updated, best understandings of addiction. So the way I think of it is it starts with emotional pain. And like you said, that pain could be really severe childhood trauma. It could be new depression and loss, and it could also be more minor things like boredom, unsatisfying career, um, empty nested, and now just kind of bored or lost with what to do. So that distress doesn't need to be severe always, but it's some kind of underlying distress. So that painful emotion is the beginning of the current. Next comes the craving. So, craving is simply the mind looking for a way out of that pain.
Mhm.
And so it could be alcohol, but it could also be food. It could be all kinds of things. So that can be substances or behaviors. So what the mind comes up with to get out of that's the craving. The next part of the current is then when we carry that out, because I separate those. One is just the mind's want, but when we carry it out, it brings us to that next phase. And that's the moment that we say, F it. right? And we don't have that emotional tolerance to leave it there. And instead
Sure.
we kind of give in.
Yeah.
And so we outwardly go through that behavior. And at the end of the current is a pleasure, right? Because that's when we numb or relieve that tension that we started with. But I call it a false pleasure because it, of course, doesn't help us. It's terrible for us and it's destructive. So it's a false pleasure, but it is still a pleasure.
Sure.
And then the current goes around and around because more false pleasure also leads to more, destruction, more shame, and so we have now more pain to
Right.
start with the next round again.
And so then you say health is living above that current. So, what would a healthier pattern be when we experience all of those emotions that are so uncomfortable for us?
Yeah, so several things. One is, yeah, we can't really get rid of life's pain, right? We have difficult things to deal with every day, sometimes really terrible things to deal with. And so the idea wouldn't be to pretend we can avoid all of life's pain, but build a tolerance for it.
Mm.
But ultimately, one of the most transformative philosophical changes for people with addiction is that the idea is not to escape the pain and go towards some more immediate pleasure. The idea is to come into contact with that. And so we want to build a resilience and a power within that knows, okay, even when life is really terrible, the idea isn't to just escape that immediately.
Right.
Um, and depending on what that pain is, it might mean accepting the pain. It might mean processing and resolving the pain if there are things like resentments and things that we reject. And it may also just mean a difference in lifestyle, where even more minor things, where a lot of people don't realize, but they're living almost every day, even if there's no immediate pain, the idea behind what they're doing that day is just reach more and more pleasure.
Mm.
Going after dopamine, going after like what they would think of as like I'm happy because I'm going towards these pleasures. But those usually aren't the kind of lifelong satisfying endeavors. And so a lot of this is changing philosophies so that we reach a life of meaning. And a life of meaning always, always includes sacrifice, whether
Okay.
that's having kids, a career worth having, a relationship worth having, having good objectives with your exercise also, of course, includes sacrifice. And that's a meaningful thing, right? So everything of value, everything meaningful to us requires a sacrifice. And so what we're talking about here is reorienting the idea of pain and pleasure so that they fall within a more meaningful framework instead of something much too superficial to say I just need to move towards pleasure every time, which would mean you never go to the gym, right? Why should I do something difficult? It's so much easier to stay home or not lift a finger. But there's something meaningful in that. So that's that's what we can do in so many other areas of life.
I think we all do want to have a life of meaning, deep down. We want it to count for something. We want to have meant something to someone or to community. And yet, yeah, we can get in that cycle that you talked about. It's very easy to get into a cycle of a pattern of behavior that's not serving us very well. How do we build that tolerance of uncomfortable feelings? You said it's like, oh, you have to be exposed to it. We have to be exposed to that uncomfortableness. How do you sit in that in the moment that you're in it and fight the drag and the pull and the desire to medicate and numb? Like, how do you do that? Because I think a lot of people sitting at home are like, they want to do it, they want to have a life of meaning, they want to sacrifice for something better, and yet in the moment, when the rub comes, it's just, is it willpower? Is it discipline? What is it that we need to shift or work on in those moments?
Yeah, I usually start people off in something much more tangible because, of course, ultimately we do want to deal with deeper issues that we struggle with. Most people aren't ready to do that right away, and that's also longer, harder work. So one of the first skills to build is even when we come up with the so-called craving, right? Whether that's alcohol, food, or whatever the thing is, we need to learn to tolerate that want
Right.
and make, I call like you make space between what the mind wants and what we choose to do.
Mm.
Because I like to highlight, I mean, it's totally fine to have natural desires to escape problems. And it's also okay to have, you know, wishes for things that are not good for us, right? It's okay to want a milkshake. What's not okay is having the milkshake, either mindlessly or giving into it every time, right? So there can be a space to be had there, and that is often practiced with kind of grounding skills and mindfulness meditation, something also called urge surfing. So there's a lot of good skills to build there where we sit with that and grow power through knowing that we can have a want and that that will eventually subside. And so one quick little easy exercise people can do is just with getting something that you normally have a hard time turning down, whether that's a bag of chips or a piece of candy or something, and just place it in front of you.
Mm.
As with any skill you build, right, in life, you want to start small and make it an achievable, winnable thing. And so, if there's something to do that with that you know you'll never be able to lay off, then don't do that one, right? Do something that you might be able to. And so you'd lay, say, the bag of chips out in front of you, and just notice what comes up in you. Notice feelings, notice thoughts, notice the wants, and and then know that that's going to peak, right? It's going to grow and grow. Like I want, and it's going to look good. It's going to feel like a nice escape. And just notice what happens in you if you can lay off. And eventually that will peak and it will subside 100% of the time.
Mm.
So we just need to start with things that are achievable. And when we do that, we grow a skill, we grow an emotional tolerance. There's things happening when we do that neurochemically
Mm.
and also philosophically in us when we do that. So it's a very empowering experience. We get to see that there is another side to it. And growing that is very empowering. And what we want in really good mental health work is that the work actually feels exciting and rewarding. If
Mm.
it's just difficult or boring and too long and hard, we give up. So having these easier wins more kind of upfront can help us see like, oh, this is exciting. Like I have some mastery over myself. There's a conscious me here that can reach some form of mastery, and I can do it a little bit here. So probably I could do that in bigger ways in my life if I keep down this path. So there's a lot more to it, but
Sure.
that's just a little sampling of, where people can begin.
Is that the urge surfing that you talked about?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I love that. And so mechanistically, I guess what's happening in the brain when we expose ourselves to something that is a temptation for us like that, and then we can sit through it. And you said that it does subside over time. So I think of the mom who comes home from work and she's stressed and she has to cook dinner and get everything ready for the next day, maybe do some meal prep, maybe get her workouts in, and she just at the end of her rope. So she knows that that glass of wine at 8 p.m. is going to calm her nerves and bring her some sort of, peace from the day. Is it the anticipation for her of that wine that floods the dopamine system that causes her to crave? Like what is happening, I suppose, neurochemically speaking? And yeah, how do we is the way to fight the dopamine flood to sit through that and just observe the wine like you were talking about. Could you explain that a little bit more?
So there's several things, but to keep it sort of manageable to discuss shortly, there's more dopamine released in anticipation of things than
Right.
when we
Yep.
reach it. And a
Sure.
lot of people don't realize that. So dopamine is less a reward chemical and more a pursuit chemical. Okay. And that's why people struggle so much with their desires and cravings because there's a stronger swell of feeling and want there, knowing I want a drink or I want the food, than when we actually drink or we actually eat. There is still a dopamine release at the end of it, but not as much as the anticipation. So that happens with food, it happens with sex and foreplay, it happens with like a trip or vacation or even an outing. We get much more excited leading up and sort of beginning the act than we do the finality of it. So that's one of the things is what we're changing. It's called operant conditioning when we change our behaviors in relation to some kind of reward and the cues and all the things involved leading up to the reward. So there are powerful things happening when we do this because there is a chemical change when we can feel that surge of dopamine and ride through it. So
Hmm.
we're changing our conditioning around it. But then there are philosophical changes that are even more enduring that happen. So it's not just like this biohack and then okay, I like get better around my dopamine. There are philosophical changes that happen in us when we feel like we are somebody now who is not so weak, right? We are somebody who has a strength.
Hmm.
And if I can do that, then that means I can do other things as well. It now becomes an undeniable thing, right? Now, instead of just saying, I'm weak or I'm bad at this or I'm an addict, we're kind of like at the start we were talking about, much better to get very specific around what we mean. And so instead of saying I'm bad or I'm an addict, say, well, when I have alcohol available and I'm having a hard day, I never can say no. And that would be an honest statement. And that does describe the problem more specifically. And so something like this challenges that, right? Now it's like, well, if sometimes I can say no, then I can't say that about myself anymore. So we're doing very real things when we do this.
Hmm. Yeah, I like that. That's very true about that anticipatory response within us. Like sometimes I'll think, like even I was at Costco. This is a small example, but um, when I go to Costco sometimes and they have the chocolate chip cookie there, I think
Mhm.
about it leading up to it. And it's almost like I've thought about it so much. It's excited me so much that I'm going to have this huge warm chocolate chip cookie that I can't but buy it. Like it's just
Mhm.
it's the drive is so strong when we engage in that thought process ahead of time because we can almost taste, it, like the salivary glands could start to stimulate and release even thinking about having something that we want. And I think that's true for, you know, all addictions, right? It's like we just think about it. So we get stuck in that loop sometimes, I think, of wanting to feel good, which of course we is natural. We want to. But then we just allow ourselves to think. And then it's like a runaway train. We can't stop it once that's already released, or it's very challenging to stop it. I feel like for myself, like it's like I have to have it now, get that over and done with, and then I can start fresh after after I'm done. But what I hear you saying is, okay, yes, these dopamine will release, that craving will, begin to happen, but it's that moment of coming face to face maybe with the substance and sitting with that uncomfortableness of not consuming and just, I mean, for me, I don't think it's driven out of an emotional pain or anything else that's driving me to it. But I don't want to be eating cookies all of the time, every time I go to Costco. And yet it seems like, it's a draw for me. I don't know. Does that make any
Yeah.
sense?
Oh, absolutely. And something maybe to add here that I think is relevant is because, like you say, it may not be that you have this terrible pain and you have a cookie eating problem. This would be more like that recreational drinker, right? Where it's like
Mhm.
sometimes with friends and they don't necessarily have a full addiction. So same thing, right? Like we all are turning to sweets and sugar, at least some of the times.
Sure.
And so we all are guilty of that. But, some people, of course, have terrible daily struggles, with a so-called like sugar addiction. But the example you give is good because it highlights the need to usually define for ourselves what we are trying to do in this whole space of like turning to vices
Mm.
and what tolerance we have. So if it was that every time you walk into Costco, you get those cookies, I'd call that bad, according to my scorecard.
Sure.
Um, we don't also need to turn the cookies down every single time. That might be a little too boring, frankly,
Right.
to lead a life that's that stringent, right? That was that rigid. So a good healthy person has flexibility. And so
Mhm.
sometimes maybe I do want to get those cookies, other times not. So the part it highlights to me is not only the moderation and adaptability, but defining for ourselves what we want proactively. So we don't want to be passive in life and sort of be wandering through and, well, maybe there's alcohol or maybe not, or there's cookies or, the dinner I'm invited to, what's there and not there. We don't want to passively go through and just be blindsided every time what we want or what we're able to do. We want to proactively decide for ourselves some general guiding principles. So, not like you have daily rules for exactly how much sugar to have, but some guiding principles. So, things like, for example, if my kids aren't usually in town, but they're in, I'm gonna let us have dessert together, and that's gonna be a nice time together.
Mhm.
Uh, and that'd be akin to like, a wedding or like a different kind of
Mhm.
ceremony. You're going to allow yourself to do that. And so that's just one little example. So rather than really, really rigid rules, at least I call guiding principles so that you have a rubric, so to speak. When you walk into Costco, you have a little better idea of what you want to do with those cookies in a way that fits your values and what you want in life. So you're not just kind of deciding on the spot based on how hungry you are.
You have agency.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's what comes to mind. I'm like, that's what I want. I want to have agency over my behaviors, over my actions, over my what's happening inside of me, my reactivity. I want to have agency over that. Um,
Hmm.
you say that painful emotion is simply a signal. You suggest a powerful tip for handling some of our negative emotions, and that is to start with, hmm. Can you explain more about that?
Yeah, a lot of people experience that pain. Let's go with like a very regular one, which would be like a low self-esteem, right? Like low self-worth. And that's usually based on, some actual things, right? Like messing up earlier in life or being deprecated so much that we believe we're not a very good person. So that let's talk about as an example of an emotional pain. Rather than just leaving it at that, we want to actually come to touch with it and examine it. And if I just say I'm a really bad person, that does nothing for me. Like there's nothing to work with there. It's as if I've just presented the end of the conversation. And so what we want to do is change the tone of how we meet that pain. So instead of just leaving it at I'm terrible, and so now that's a bad feeling that or encountering the feeling and wanting to get away from it as quickly as possible or pretend it's not there, we're coming to terms with it. So we're saying, I don't think I'm a bad person. And the tone should be one of curiosity. So
Hmm.
that's a signal to follow. So we say, wow, I think I'm that bad a person, huh? And now we say, what's going on there?
Hmm.
Where did that come from? Hmm, what do I actually think about that? Right? There's all kinds of questions if we prompt the correct tone of curiosity. And if we follow those as real questions, we'll actually do good work on ourselves. Back to like when you said, like, what does it mean to work on ourselves?
Hmm.
This would be one of the deeper ways to work on ourselves is to actually explore what on earth is really going on in us when we have these bad feelings and not leave it at the surface.
Hmm. I'll do that sometimes when my body responds before I understand what my mind is thinking. Sometimes I'll wake up in the morning and you feel a sense of dread. I feel it in my soul. I feel it in my heart, my stomach, maybe my palms, or my heart rate is elevated. And then I'll instantly ask myself, what's going on? What's happening? What are you thinking right now? And then, I mean, you can always trace it back. Oh, X plus Y equals Z. And yes, of course, I'm thinking this right now, or I'm feeling this way. I'm feeling anxiety. So I love that. I think that is such an important way, as you said, to work on yourselves. And you can do that anywhere. You can be driving in a car, you can have a moment of reactivity when someone cuts you off and you explode and you didn't want to behave like that. And you can ask yourself, okay, what was that about? What just happened inside of me? What did I feel? What did I think? So I love all of that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, even someone cutting you off, it's like, well, don't just leave it at its face. Like, yes, it's a big piss off when someone cuts you off, and you can just leave it at the surface, right? And say, well, he cut me off. I'm pissed off. But like, why are you so pissed off?
Yeah.
It's like maybe you feel like the world hates you. Maybe you feel like this guy made you late, and maybe you realize like you feel badly and you'd want to be home more. And so it feels like that was threatened, or
Sure.
there's deeper things that can come up when we look at like, well, why did that matter at all? You can get home
Yeah.
maybe 30 seconds later, probably not even. Like, why is that so upsetting? And so it may
Yeah.
have to do with a hatred for certain people in the world or other things that are lurking under.
Yeah. I just had an incident with my daughter the other day too, where we both responded to each other poorly in front of people. And when we talked about it after, I had said that I was embarrassed, and she had said she was embarrassed. And I'm like, well, and there it is. We felt embarrassed by the things that were said or how it was approached. And so then we responded in a way we didn't want to, but embarrassment, not being seen, not being heard, that was the starting point, and then it was reflected in our behavior. So I just think it's such a crucial part of growth that we begin to understand those things. We think about stress a lot, and I hear this in circles all over the place. And one of the things, especially in women's health, like we talk about, getting adequate sleep, exercising, proper nutrition, hormone care. I'm thinking about the menopausal woman. And one of the big points to work on is to get rid of stress or manage your stressors. And I think a lot of people don't know how to do that, right? Like it's just like
Mhm.
so easy to say, work on your stress. But if a stress can't be eliminated, we have to then work on ourselves in response to the stress. What is your advice on how we can do that effectively?
Yeah, I kind of think of it in a couple of buckets. Sometimes we have stressors that we can do things about practically. So we can set boundaries or try to say no to things, and make whatever changes we need to in life to de-stress that day. So those are around more immediate choices. If you can do those, great, right? And if that removes a lot of stress and you can psychologically do that. But, what most people encounter is it's hard maybe to say no, or there's things that they have to put up with that are going to stay. And it might be a family member issue, it might be a work issue, but you can't just easily leave the job or all kinds of things. And so that's a different bucket to me, where we switch into not a mode of like practical decision and changes, but instead we're in this mode of really introspecting. And
Right.
so that work is everything that we're talking about already today, right? Is to look at like what is that pain and where does that come from? But also managing what we do. So we all have, if you don't know for yourself already, it's really good to try to understand, what do I tend to do when I'm not happy or when things
Mm,
are in my way is even the simpler way to put it.
like that.
Right? So stressors are usually that there's some threat to something you want to do, whether it's like your peace or people that you want to be with or activities that you want to be able to do. Stressors interfere, right, with what we are trying to do with ourselves. And and it's good to learn, what do I do when that happens? What are my patterns? Do I get angry? Do I do I want to run and hide? Do I stay in bed? Or do I fight through? But am I when I fight through, do I go too hard? So do I get too aggressive, too defensive, or do I, tend to do other things that don't even address it, where I'm just working out a lot, eating really healthy, or trying to volunteer, and so these are what we call defense mechanisms
Right.
psychologically. And so there are a lot of well-established patterns that we can recognize in people, and it's good to learn what yours are. And when you do wellness work and you're just trying to improve life, it always starts and ends with our inner state. So um, we can't really do, church and family and uh, you know, work for our body and career or purpose. Like we can't really make great strides there unless we have some inner peace and direction. And ultimately, that's also what we're trying to get out of all of those wellness factors as well, is some kind of contentment and purpose. So it starts and ends with the inner self, and that's
Mhm.
why the work is so important.
Hmm. Hmm. Not everyone, of course, can go see a psychiatrist or even a therapist to work on some of this stuff, but thank God there are lots of programs and things out like what you offer. Can you tell our audience a little bit more about your programs?
Yeah, it really is meant to get to the underlying currents that we're talking about, and so whether it's like a really bad alcohol problem or just turning to other vices more than you feel like you should,
Hmm.
the program makes sure that you won't miss all of the themes that come up. So all the things we've described are like tiny little pieces of it, but there's a lot that needs to be developed to have a really complete approach. And so I don't think of it just like a complete approach to addiction. It's really teaching new philosophies and uncovering what's getting in your way to just lead a life where you have better mastery over what you're doing with yourself and why. Addiction is just sort of the topic of it, you could say.
Hmm.
Um, but it's a very deep course. And so it's for people that really want to explore that. So it's made up of video lessons, like short bite-sized video lessons, and those are each followed by exercises to integrate what you learn. And then there's a music component to it as well to emotionally connect to themes and topics.
Oh, neat.
And then some other pieces to it as well. But yeah, it's a really good roadmap, that helps guide people through that whole journey.
It sounds wonderful. Is there anything else today that you wanted to share that maybe we didn't talk about?
No, I think you asked great questions, and I think we got to the core of the matter.
Yeah.
So
Hmm.
I invite people in whatever way that they are, however severely you turn to vices or however interested you are in self-development. Um, a lot of people already know they want to do that kind of work, or other people sometimes feel like they've done that work, but it's not necessarily to the depth that they want for that more kind of inner contentment. So I just invite people to. It should be a fun process, and so if working on yourself is not fun, then try a different modality or
Yeah.
approach because working on ourselves should be a lifelong endeavor that's fun and rewarding. And so I encourage everybody to consider something like that.
I was going to say, I feel like I have done so much work and yet there's still so much, anytime you have those moments of reactivity, it means something's going on. It's a time to get introspective and learn more about yourself. And yeah, I think it's crucial work because personally, and as a trainer for 20 years, I see how much it informs our choices in our nutrition, in our fitness. So if people that's who I work with, if they think that they can just do a 360 or 180-degree shift and change their whole body composition and trajectory and leave out the wellness piece, I will say it probably won't last, right? It's like all three things, fitness, wellness, nutrition have to come into play. And I thank you so much for your time today in bringing that wellness piece to us.
Yeah, thanks a lot for having me, Tracy.
Absolutely. So you can follow Dr. Hochman over on Instagram. It is Dr. Daniel Hochman over there. Yes.
I think that might be self-recovery health.
Oh, yes. Self
You,
recovery health. It looks like you have both. So I'll link both. But yeah, self recovery health. And your website is selfrecovery.org.
yeah, that's it.
Excellent. So I will link all of that in the description below. So even if I didn't get it right there, check. There's lots of links down there. There's a self-recovery quiz that you can take or a readiness for change quiz. So lots of little freebies. Again, check the links in the description below. Thank you again for your time.
Thanks for having me.
Now to all of you, go move daily in your fitness, your wellness, and your nutrition. And we'll see you all in the next Move Daily Talks.